hear me okay? So I'm here to talk about just a side, just a portion of the archaeobotanical data that I have been able to recover from 2 sites in the Maya region. So thank you Maya for introducing us to the Maya region. So I'm talking about the Solanaceae, the nightshades, today specifically. So many of you know probably the Solanaceae is really a very large and diverse family, which makes it a little bit complicated for us. We're looking at ancient seeds. There is so much variety, but it's also very interesting. So Solanaceae are economically important for both culinary purposes, but also they have alkaloids and for drugs and other things. Solanaceae are found both in the New World and the Old World. However, they're the most diverse in the New World. And so there's about 95 genera with 2,500 species. And Solanum is really the largest genus with about 1,250 species. So ethnobotany today in the Maya region reveals that numerous species are still used by the Maya for various different things, for both eating and medicinal purposes. However, when we look at the archaeological record, it becomes a little bit harder to understand what they were using. So, for both in terms of food and ritual purposes. There is some epigraphic and iconographic data from the Maya region. The botanical evidence is a little bit more limited in terms of the Solanaceae. I'll show you a map just now. And that's because, in general, there's been few projects over a very large area. Some exceptions, of course, David Lenz is here, and others. But and also in terms of relative poor preservation in some areas because of the wet and dry cycles, and they have to be obviously carbonized to really preserve well. And then the processing of certain foods. Starch grains are great for that. They kind of make it easier to recover some plants. So for those that are not familiar with it, here's a general map of the Maya region, and I'm talking about the classic period. So we're going from about 250 to 800 AD. And the Maya really spread over a really large area, and so there are the limits with the lines. However, I'll be focusing more on this area here, which is northwestern Petén. Petén is the largest department in Guatemala, and the sites that I worked at are right here. So the Maya are really well known for their architecture, their long-distance trade, food-producing systems, and art. And so we're really starting to piece together their diet and their use of plants for ritual and medicinal purposes. And they were really spread over so many different environments that you're expecting to find a lot of different plant remains. Today, there's about 7 million Maya, so they're still around, they're a vibrant community, and speaking 22 different languages in Guatemala alone. So the Maya region is very diverse, and this is just a little slide to give you, an idea of what kind of plants and animals. The area where I work in is very wet. There's about 1,500 millimeters of water annually, but this can vary depending on the year. And you have very different plants, of course, and animals, beautiful animals, jaguars, and lots of trees with spines, which are very dangerous at times if you touch them. So today the Solanaceae are obviously very important. If you go to any market in Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, whatever, you will find tomatoes, husk tomatoes, and chili peppers, of course, anywhere in the markets. So those are usually found today. So what are they used for? Well, thankfully we've had lunch, so I can show you these images. They're used for many different dishes, and here you have like pipián, bocón de pollo, and tamales, which many of you have probably tried. And a lot of these dishes, all of these here, actually use some kind of Solanaceae, in particular the chili peppers. But you also have tomatoes and husk tomatoes in most of these. For example, the ones up here, these ones use both tomatoes and husk tomatoes, and then this is clearly husk tomatoes. So, some of you might know them as tomatillos, perhaps. So they're really prevalent in the cuisine today. And in terms of the rituals, you can also find Solanaceae used in rituals today. I don't know if any of you have heard of the chak grain ceremony that goes on in the lowland Maya region. This happens harvested every year, and they create these underground ovens called pits, and they will cook these tamales, sacred breads, and a lot of the times they'll have these altars, like shown here, with various different plants. They're mostly not Solanaceae, but they will include some kind of like Solanaceae, like the tomatoes, and these are considered to bring water. Tomatoes are really wet, and so they'll try and include plants that are reminiscent of the wet season, or that will bring rain, because the purpose of the ceremony is to bring rains and to ensure a successful harvest in the future. So they'll use tomatoes and chilies in their food, but also chilies in their drinks, in atole, which is basically a maize drink. And in the Guatemalan highlands, they also have these different sorts of rituals, again, to thank the gods, venerate the ancestors, and they'll burn really just about anything. In these sort of circular areas, and these offerings will include plants, fruit, flowers, and animal blood spread on top. And Linda Brown has done a lot of work on this, and she noted that, for example, chili peppers were burnt in these ceremonies, but they tended to be for these black ceremonies. In other words, to get rid of like illnesses or bad eye and things like that. So they were typically used in sort of more negative aspects, but you can really burn just about anything in these circles. And so today, of course, there's still home gardens where people grow their foods and also have medicinal plants. And within them, here's just a little list of some of the ones that you can find, at least in the literature, of the ones that are cultivated today, and then some that are encouraged or tolerated, as in they just grow, by themselves, as weedy plants, and they're used for a variety of things. Some of these are used for medicinal purposes, and then obviously the other ones will be eaten as well. And let's not forget our fields. They're called milpas, and so here there's usually intercropping of various different things. And you'll find chili peppers, but also the tomatoes and also tobacco. Again, you have a bunch of encouraged or tolerated plants, and then you'll have some that grow from secondary growth or fallows. So when the fields, when you harvest the plants, you leave them for a while, you'll have these plants that grow, and these are the ones again mentioned in the literature today. Just to show you what that looks like when they're intercropping various things. Okay, so let's move on to the archaeobotanical evidence so far for the Maya region. So this is just to show you some of the Solanaceae that have been found, actually most of them. I recently heard of a tobacco seed, right? Maya have been found in Belize, so that adds to this list. But in general, what you can see is that what has been found is mostly capsicum, so chili peppers, and in different forms. There is some starch from Belize, there are peduncles from Dos Pilas. So these are the sites that I've been working at. So this is just really around the northwestern Petén. You have some from El Salvador, both seeds, peduncles, and then some residues from up here in Mexico, from vessels. So this is basically it's kind of limited in terms of understanding what's going on with Solanaceae. And the only seeds that are not capsicum are actually from Solanum. There's been 12 found from Quay, and that's about it. And otherwise, we don't know much else. And so yes, this is where we're looking at. Maya also mentioned tobacco, and so I won't spend too much time on this, but what we do have is epigraphic and iconographic evidence of tobacco. For example, a beautiful mural at Calakmul, which shows these glyphs that mention tobacco person. So we know that that there was probably tobacco. Here, this individual seems to be vomiting, actually, after inhaling tobacco, and it's unclear whether it was mixed with some kind of toad, some substance from a toad. That's not my specialty, so I will just move on. But, and then here, this is from a vessel, from a barrel at Tikal, and as you can see, someone seems to be smoking, like what seems like a cigarette there. And then finally, the vessel that Maya mentioned as well, with some nicotine alkaloids from about 700 AD. So there is tobacco, for sure. So let's move on to what I was able to find within these samples. The first site is in Peruhuaca. It's really large. It is strategically positioned in the area where trade was moving up from the south of the south of the Maya region, all the way up north, and then also east to west. And 30 kilometers northwest, there's La Corona. At In Peruhuaca, from a fire shrine, I will not go into details about what it means. I could spend an hour talking about that, but from this fire shrine, there were about 17 plant families found, and I found about 10 Solanaceae seeds in there. And this fire shrine was used ritually to burn plants to feed the gods, to request for successful harvests for the following season. So it was a very important context, archaeologically. The second one is La Corona. It's a smaller site, but relatively important, and had connections with Peruhuaca during the classic period. And this was from a midden, a feasting midden. It's within a chutun, which is a bell-shaped pit, man-made pit underground. And as you can see here, there's some ceramics, but this is like a close-up. And there were thousands of animal bones and ceramic sherds. I was able to collect some flotation samples from that, and there are about 10 plant families within it, and about 16 Solanaceae seeds in it. So what I was able to find was, I should probably say that identifying these based on the seeds is obviously very difficult. Usually, I think for the Solanaceae family, one tends to look at the whole plant. Now, I've only been able to recover the seeds, and so I've compared with many species. I've done some experimental carbonizing to compare them. And Solanaceae tend to be very diverse, even from plant to plant, right? Species to species. And also when you carbonize them, they change shape, size. So again, these are all tentative identifications, I should probably say that. And so what I think that there are in the samples are definitely some black nightshades. And these two from the left, this is a side profile, the one in the center here, it's this one. These are probably what I'm calling black nightshades, Solanum americanum, maybe. And these are the kind of weedy plant that I was able to find growing next to an excavation pit. It's really, it looks similar. And then this one was from the midden at La Corona as well. So I think we have black nightshades. And these tend to be poisonous, but the Maya today eat some of the leaves. So could have been consumed like that. And then I also was able to find some possible physalis seeds in there. These come from the midden. These three, they're very small, as you can see, and as Maya mentioned, carbonization tends to make seeds grow smaller and change shape, so they may have been a little bit larger originally. And this is a modern physalis seed, so as we know it, husk tomato or tomatillo. And these today are consumed, as I mentioned earlier. And this one I'm not 100% sure. I put it under physalis, but it could be something else. It fits in terms of size and shape, but I'm not 100% sure. And then I was very happy to find some kind of capsicum, so chili pepper. And so this one was a whole seed up here. It's also very, it's rather small when you compare it to the modern seeds. And so I'm trying to call it perhaps a wild chili pepper. We know that the capsicum annuum, the variety of Candelaria, probably around there, so they could have been using the wild chili pepper, but they could also have used, it could also be a immature plant, I don't know. And then there were also these seed fragment, the coats of the seeds within the fire shrine. Oh, this comes from the fire shrine. And these could have come, these were different from different seeds, though, from this one. It was from a different layer. And then I also recovered some starch grains from this is from La Corona. This was from a grinding stone. And as you can see, it's a whole bunch of chili pepper starch grains together. And Deborah Pearsall was able to confirm that this was actually chili pepper, so very very exciting news. And based on the size, it's probably domesticated. Linda Perry, who's done much work on this, finds that the domesticated starch grains measure between 13 and 45 microns, and these ones measure about 25, so they're probably domesticated. And when you put it on the side, you can definitely see that sort of ridge furrow, which is what Linda Perry found on her chili peppers. So yeah, this comes from the same image from before, just one was on the side. And so it could have come from like capsicum and fruits. And then finally, I found some unidentified Solanaceae seeds, and they're unidentified because they were all stuck together. These were some that tended to just break off each other when I put them under the microscope when they dried. And some of them are very distorted. It's easier to see that they're actually Solanaceae under the microscope than on the images, probably. But they do have the typical seed coat of Solanaceae in some parts. And these tended to be larger, actually, than the ones I showed you before. I do not know what they are. I compared it to so many different seeds, but again, because they've changed morphology and they were stuck together, it's really hard to tell. But what seems to have happened is that they were stuck together when they were burnt. And so what I did was I tried to do some experimental archaeology. These are actually archaeological samples. Two of them, there are probably like two of them stuck together next to each other right here. And this one has like the seed coat sort of stuck on the side. And what I did is I carbonized both fresh and dry seeds. And so I took some physalis and some tomato seeds. And so I carbonized physalis that were wet, so they were fresh. And after they were carbonized, they were all stuck together, right? Because they have this sort of gelatinous membrane around the seeds. And then when I burned some Solanum americanum, a dry fruit that had been left out to dry, and after I carbonized it, the seeds tended to be, very loose from each other. And so I decided to think about why that would be. And so I mentioned pipián earlier, the dish. Maybe some of you have had it. And so what is typically done, at least today in Guatemala, is that you'll roast the tomatoes and the husk tomatoes and the chili peppers all on a griddle. Today it's made of metal, but in the past it would have been probably clay. And archaeologically they have been found. These are from La Corona on the bottom here. And so basically they will roast these various things on the comal, the griddle, and then they'll grind them to make the sauce. And so I was potentially thinking that one way that this could have happened is, this is from a feast. The ones that were all stuck together were all from a feasting deposit. So I was envisioning, someone roasting the tomatoes and it going wrong, like you just carbonize those by mistake or something. So that was one way that potentially these traditions could have continued, for example, into today. And so basically what I did is just showed you some of the seeds that were collected from Guatemala. These were tentative identifications, of course, and more work needs to be done. Physalis I don't think has been identified yet, although Maya told me that maybe she has some physalis in her samples. So that would be exciting to add to our knowledge of what plants were being used in the Maya region in both feasting contexts and ritual contexts. In terms of the size of the seeds, it seems that there were both maybe domesticated and wild seeds, and these were used for both consumption and ritual purposes. It would seem, at least from the context that were excavated. And it's interesting that a lot of these, solanums and probably the physalis, these may have been weedy perhaps, and so it does suggest that, as they're used today, they were probably growing in the same sort of environments as in the past, in these gardens and the milpas perhaps. They were probably also cultivated, some of them. And if indeed, the one I mentioned, the pipián, that's what happened, then it would suggest that some of the food preparations are, that there's a continuation with those food preparations. So that would be fun. And of course, a lot more work needs to be done, but I think that there's a lot of work being done now in the Maya region, which is really, really exciting, and we can hopefully compare these a lot more in the future. So hopefully we'll know more about that. Thank you very much.
We have time for one question. Mark?
Yes, we have Solanum americanum or Solanum nigrum in Hawaii. It's considered to be native because David Nelson collected it when he came on the boat with James Cook, Captain Cook, so it's the first collection. And I'm just wondering, this is probably bird dispersed, but that's a wide distribution from Hawaii all the way to Guatemala. It's used medicinally still by Hawaiians or practitioners in Hawaii. So is it, do you know anything more about its medicinal use in, or food use in where you found it?
Of the Solanum americanum specifically?
Yes.
No, I think the americanum was, I'm not sure if it's being used medicinally. I know that some other of the solanums are. But I think that one is the one that's actually eaten or consumed. That's like the only one that I know. Just want to make sure. Oh no, so the americanum is used medicinally, but I'm not really sure in what preparations exactly. I know that I think it's used for like menstruation and pain, like for women problems and anemia. Yeah.
Might want to check that one with the Hawaii. It's called Popolo.
Oh, great, thank you.
Hawaii.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.